Malone, your book. It is coming out October 8th. I'm looking forward to it so much. That is going to be brilliant. Okay. What does the nightmare scenario of Kamala Harris, Tim Walz presidency, vice presidency, administration look like? What is your greatest fear? What is the greatest threat? Go.
So I think that one of the greatest concerns with a Harris-Walz presidency and executive branch is that we will see a continuation and expansion of the lawfare, of the weaponization of government. And I see no barriers to them doing that. There's a whole series of things that comes with that. And the expansion of the censorship industrial complex is a key part of that. And if we take a step back and think to ourselves, what does that really mean? What we're talking about is an administration that will not respect the Constitution, in particular, the First and Second Amendment in the Bill of Rights. So she actively wants to shut down and regulate gun ownership. And she's all in with, remember, it was Barack Obama who really championed the thesis in this infamous speech at Hoover at Stanford, in which he said that we have to censor in order to preserve democracy, quote unquote. Made
I
a big
recall
point
that.
about
That
that.
was stunning.
And Harris is all in on that aspect and many other aspects of Obama's agenda. I mean, in a significant way, this is going to be yet another Obama term under a Harris-Walz presidency. Clearly, Kamala Harris doesn't have the sense that God gave a pea. And she is a figurehead. And if we needed evidence of that, the position that has been taken in the press and throughout media since as Maureen Dowd calls it, since the coup with Biden, demonstrates that she is merely a figurehead. She has been placed into that position and elevated very strategically and supported using an amazing juggernaut of propaganda. If anyone needed to have a clear example of the power of modern psychological manipulation technology, psywar or psyops or whatever you want to call it, we can see it in the campaign that is being mounted around Harris and Walz. This is a campaign that seems to have no boundaries, just like with everything else in what they do. And it's been well documented that they have been actively recruiting folks from Hollywood and shills in general and offering to fly them out and house them, et cetera, to participate in their rallies. There's been multiple examples where they've been caught at the use of deep fakes, the manipulation of images, for instance, to demonstrate that they have much larger crowds attending or more people sitting in an arena, et cetera, in support of her. This is a campaign that seems to have no boundaries in terms of what they'll do, and I think that's indicative of what we'll see if and when she's elected. We're going to see a presidency, if that's the case, that is completely aligned with this new globalist, it's really not new, the globalist thrust to a corporatist socialist future of a one world government. The truth is, I don't want to sound apocalyptic, but the truth is that if we have a Harris-Walz presidency, that may be the last phase of an independent, sovereign United States. And for a very simple reason, there's a good chance that under Biden, the new treaty that's being branded as a pact that is being promoted by the United Nations, ostensibly to further the 17 goals and objectives of Agenda 2030, will be signed and will have the force of law. We have a situation here in the States. Many of us on the conservative side tell ourselves that the Constitution has specific language about treaties and the role of the Senate. But in fact, that is not true in the modern administrative state. The executive branch is able to activate a treaty to engage in formally binding, legally binding treaty relationships with other entities based on executive order, and that has the force of law. And there's some underlying questions in terms of constitutionality that somehow need to be brought forth to the Supreme Court. But Agenda 2030, which, for instance, asserts that human beings have the right to migrate and live wherever they want, that is the underpinnings of the open border policy. Agenda 2030 was signed by Obama and has the force of an international treaty. It engages us in an agreement with the United Nations that is considered binding under international law. So this new agenda for the future that is intended to be signed towards the end of September will take that a notch up. And this is how the UN and their partner, the World Economic Forum, work. It's very incremental, it's gradual. They put this in place, and then they put that in place, and then they put that in place. And absolutely what we have with the United Nations is a socialist organization led by the former head of the Socialist International, the former head of the Socialist Party in Portugal, Antonio Guterres, is a lifelong avowed socialist ever since he graduated from Lisbon
Can you
University.
repeat that? Because of all the horrible, evil things I could say about Gutierrez, I did not know that fact. So I'm so embarrassed. Can you repeat that again? He was part of the what?
So Antonio Guterres was a electrical engineer when he graduated from University in Lisbon under Salazar. Okay, so he was there before the Carnation Revolution. And he joined the Socialist Party a couple of years out from college. And then the Carnation Revolution happened. And he was elected to a local office in Portugal and gradually made its way up to become head of the Socialist Party and eventually Prime Minister of Portugal. When he completed his term, and by the way, I spent a lot of time in Portugal because we breed the Portuguese horse called the Lusitano. So Guterres is considered by most Portuguese to have been a failed prime minister, but he failed upwards. He failed as the prime minister, but he was the head of the Socialist Party in Portugal, and then became the head of, I think it's called the Socialist International. So that's their
When you
global
throw international
organization.
in there, that gets really scary sounding. Socialist
Well, it's
International.
just basically another variant of the Marxist Communist Party that has been cropping up, for generations now. But he was promoted from that position to the United Nations, and then worked his way up to be appointed as Secretary General, and he's now in his second appointed term as Secretary General. Nobody's elected him. This Secretary General gets appointed by the collective ambassadors of the United Nations, and the United Nations is fundamentally become a socialist organization, and that absolutely is on hyperdrive since he assumed the Director General position. A strong case can be made, and we talk about this in the book, Cywar, that Guterres is probably the most powerful man in the world right now. His power exceeds in many ways that of the President of the United States. He doesn't have an army in the same way, but he has a ton of influence, and he has these various affiliated organizations, including basically a treaty between the United Nations and the World Economic Forum. So the WEF positions itself as a capitalist organization because it's basically the trade union for the 1,000 largest companies in the world. But in fact, under
They're
their
union men.
stakeholders, they're union men representing their interest as um, uh, transnational corporations. And they are invested in this structure that Klaus Schwab came up with many years ago. Many people aren't aware that Klaus Schwab's mentor was Henry Kissinger. And most people are also not aware that the WEF was originally basically created out of whole cloth by the CIA. But Klaus Schwab is German, and he is very invested in the German model for industrial production. And he has built his career and his position around this logic of stakeholder capitalism, which is basically a socialist capitalist fusion. If you look at it, frankly, Germany lost the war, and they lost that party and its leader who committed suicide, but they didn't veer from their commitment to democratic socialism and the idea of the fusion of the interests of corporations, large corporations, labor, and the state. Okay, that is corporatism. That is corporatism as Mussolini defined it. Mussolini famously said, the proper name for fascism should really be corporatism. What we have in the World Economic Forum is, I argue strongly, is a form of fascism. It is corporatism, and it is corporatism like as has been practiced throughout Europe with Euro-socialism, where you have basically a socialist capitalist structure. And as we were talking in the preamble before we started recording, the irony of all this is that the German economy is now being decimated by the full-on communist CCP, who has incorporated and built their own form of capitalism that is in many ways less constrained in its economic activities, much more aggressive, because the state acts as an imperialist power to advance the interests of Chinese industry. And they are decimating the German manufacturing capacity because they are able to undercut in price in particular, the electric vehicle market, but also solar panels and alternative technology. Germany has gone all in on the green agenda. They believed all the propaganda about that. And I have a friend who's German who is a journalist for a Christian publication who has been based here in Maryland and Northern Virginia for many years, but just went back to Germany. And she came back shocked. She said, the place has completely changed. The cute little mountain towns and valleys and the old rural Germany that she loves so much is gone. Every single building seems to have a solar panel on top of it and a windmill. The windmills are everywhere. And this is what Germany has basically staked its future on. And that turns out to be the most expensive form of energy right now. And so as a consequence, and this is why Nord Stream was so important, the blowing up of Nord Stream, as a consequence, German industry is starved for power. And so they have this kind of pincer movement going on in Germany in terms of their economic infrastructure. They have hobbled themselves, they have constrained themselves by investing only in green energy, not in nuclear, not in natural gas, because that's been cut off from Russia. So no petro-based fuel. And they can't sustain their energy needs. And they are being outcompeted by the growing power of China and frankly in the industry, automobile industry, which is one of their mainstays, Korea, South Korea. And this is a classic example of where Klaus Schwab and this whole kind of socialist logic is going with the United Nations. They wish to move towards a one world government. They wish to push the United States into a structure akin to the European Union. And bringing it back to Kamala, Kamala and Walz are all in on this, right? They are going to put us into these treaty arrangements and these structural arrangements in which nation states, just like in the European Union, are subsidiary underneath a structure, a unifying structure. In the case of the UN and the WEF, it's a one world government. They speak about it openly. And it's a one world government based on socialist principles that everyone has the right to a living wage. All of this logic, these things that we're hearing in American media about minimum wage, living wage, the open borders policy, universal basic income, the commitment to universal access to internet, which is now an international right, according to
Internet
the
is an
United.
international right?
Internet is an international right, according to the United
Is someone going to
Nations.
pay for my internet? Because
No,
I'm
you are
joking.
going to pay.
I'm going to pay for everybody
As
else.
Margaret Thatcher notoriously said, socialism is a great system until you run out of other people's money to spend. And so when you look at this, with this, for instance, new agenda that Biden is probably going to sign off on at the end of the month, the United Nations anticipates taxing nation states as a fraction of their gross domestic product. Okay, that's how this is going to be capitalized. The same
Taxation.
logic.
So this is a
It's
treaty. This is a
it is.
treaty, just like all
That's
the
right.
other agreements. You have to buy into it. You have to sign because it's a voluntary association of states. You can't compel
It
them.
then becomes binding.
Then it
And
becomes
like in
binding.
the European Union, the nation states will be placed under a umbrella government that will be largely appointed. And then above that sits these global public-private partnerships that will set the agendas, function as the think tanks, and provide direction down to this massive globalized bureaucracy, which will become the UN WEF axis. And then nation states will be legally and organizationally under that. So we'll have some autonomy to manage our own affairs. But in these big picture issues that involve the global challenges that can't be addressed by independent nation states, such as pandemics or climate change or energy or um, uh, um, inequality or women's rights or trans rights, that whole socialist overlay is all going to be managed and promoted by a one world government because clearly the independent nation states have not been up to the task of managing global population and managing global resources. And so we have to have a single globalized government, and that globalized government is going to be structured around socialist principles. And this is, in terms of the big picture, we're going to have lawfare and censorship, heavy, in the United States, like nothing we've seen before. If you want to see where we're going, look at Trudeau and look at Keir Starmer in the UK, and look at what Macron has just done with Telegraph. That's where all this goes. Elon, the Telegraph situation was not just a shot across the bow to try to get the encryption keys to Telegraph, because all the intelligence agencies all over the world want to shut that puppy down because they're using it to transmit forbidden information such as wartime footage. But it's really also a shot at Elon Musk that basically under the same thesis, they can imprison him. And of course, you're seeing the same, if you want to see another example, another exemplar of where this is going, look at what's happening in Brazil. So if you take Brazil, France, the UK, they are all controlled. What happened was during the COVID crisis, and when Klaus Schwab talks about the Great Reset
Mm.
and the Great Narrative, this people act as if this is a conspiracy theory. It's absolutely not. Okay, it is the one of the key agendas that occurred during the COVID crisis was advancing this Great Reset agenda, which includes a number of, let's call them control functions, that very much support this new globalized economy idea, thesis, stakeholder capitalism. And by the way, stakeholder capitalism is what's behind ESG and DEI. That's where this is coming from. ESG and DEI is coming pushed down into our corporations intentionally. Klaus Schwab talks about this. Larry Fink talks about this. Larry Fink is all in with this new globalist movement. It's all in with the WEF and this strange mix of capitalism and socialism and cronyism. And he speaks directly, this on record, Larry Fink saying, we have to force these corporations to accept DEI policies. The DEI has been pushed down into our culture from this same structure that is being designed and empowered to sit above the United States and all independent nation states. And what's going to happen is if we get, and this is by intention, if we have Harris-Walz come in, it is going to be the last phase of the takeover. You can hear it in their language that they consider the Constitution to be negotiable. They consider the First and Second Amendments to be anachronistic. They just don't serve the needs of a modern nation state, and so that's going to have to be changed. And that we will find, the likes of you and I will find ourselves in a situation in which if we speak out, just like the doctors getting decertified and all of the psychological warfare technology, the crowd stalking, all of that delegitimization and weaponized hate that's been deployed against us that have been speaking out about what's been going on. That's going to come down on your head and everybody else that's labeled as conservative. And as you probably know, because you live in northern DC, you know that every single person, almost to a man and woman that served in the Trump administration has been subjected to lawfare. That kind of weaponization of government is going to go on hyperdrive now against anyone who's a dissident against this new structure.
There's so many things. When we talk about Harris-Walz, clearly many of the things that they have said, and there's clips everywhere, just all over X. I don't know what we would have done without X and Elon Musk. I believe that God has his hands in all things. And just like that bullet missing the president's skull, Fallon just hitting his ear, I think that the fact that Elon Musk purchased X at that time, the way it happened, the transition of his thinking and all of these other influencers that you would never have dreamed a few years ago that they'd be saying Trump. I'm with Trump.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Of course, Bobby having his network moment, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore, is the short version of that speech. That was, I asserted in one of our Substacks that we are in a period of a major realignment politically.
It's beautiful.
And the question is it going to happen fast enough? And can we overwhelm the nefarious activities that are clearly getting planned for the election?
The October, November surprise.
Well, that almost pales by comparison to the manipulations that we're likely to see in the voting booth, in the voting process,
Yeah, I
in
know.
my opinion.
I agree that the risk is huge. Usually I'll say, if there is a free and fair election and Donald Trump wins, because it's the only way he can win, and he would if there was a free and fair election. So, the two are dependent upon each other. You've mentioned a few things, and
Well,
I want to,
remember the last time the intervention was around the Hunter Biden laptop. We had multiple intelligence community members falsely claim that that was Russian disinformation. And had they not done that, there's no question that the election would have gone for Trump. We don't have to argue. I mean, we can go round and around about what Rudy Giuliani eloquently now points out in terms of what happened in various swing states. But at the ballot booth and with these, stuffed ballots, et cetera, the mail-in shenanigans. But that one case alone, the manipulation of the information ecosystem concerning Hunter Biden's laptop clearly swung the election. The election would have had a completely different outcome if that had not
I
been
think it
done.
was 9 to 12% of voters said that they would have voted differently had they known the full extent of the Hunter laptop.
And to that point, you're citing that number, and that's a good number. Remember that Robert Epstein, not Epstein, but Epstein and his group have clearly demonstrated that the subliminal, the kind of ethereal messaging that Google pushes out all the time, these little ads and blurbs that pop up on all of our search engines and then go away. They've clearly demonstrated that that can swing undecided voters by 20 points. And that Google has been aggressively manipulating elections now for a few cycles, not just in the United States, but across the world. And really, it's very difficult to document that. And he set up a system with a series of a large number of individuals that basically do screen grabs because the information flashes and then it goes away. So you have to be there in the moment to grab that information and get the documentation if you want to be able to do the research. And they've done the heavy lifting to do that.
Something that you kept saying about um, the UN was very interesting to me, and about this form of government that they want to institute, which of course is one world government, is globalism. It sounds to me that they're
And by the way, it's central planning, just like the former Soviet Union,
yeah,
which means
central
it's going to
planning.
have all the problems of central planning.
Right, like starvation
Yeah,
and poverty
and
and
mass
homelessness
murder and yeah.
and a gulag archipelago, no doubt.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about it, what it really reminded me of is this. Here we live in a federation. You can say
Yes.
confederation, but people would get, ooh, confederation. But it's really, that's all it is. Federation, confederation of independent sovereign states. Those independent sovereign states, 13 of them, approved a constitution that delegated limited authorities, limited powers, and they had to be
Yes.
enumerated to this federal government. Now, we blew past that. I don't know when we first blew,
Largely for mutual defense, remember? That was the big focus here,
was what?
to promote to promote interstate commerce and to enable collective defense
Right.
against